I have performed over 2,000 heart surgeries, and I can tell you exactly what kills people after they turn 60. It is not what they ate at McDonald's, what they thought was healthy. The low-fat yogurt, the grain crackers, the glass of orange juice every morning, and the diet soda instead of the regular one. These are the choices people feel good about, but they are the exact things I see clogging arteries on my operating table. Not burger. Bacon, but foods with heart-healthy labels on the front are the problem. Today, I am going to name all these foods. There are 10 categories. By the end of this, you will never look at your grocery cart the same way again. Let me take you back to the 1970s. That is when everything changed, and not for the better. A researcher published a study claiming that dietary fat was the driver of heart disease. This spread through medicine quickly. Governments rewrote nutrition guidelines overnight. The food industry also changed overnight. Suddenly, fat was the villain, and low-fat everything was presented as the answer to heart disease. So Americans cut back on butter, switched to margarine, replaced eggs with cereal, and bought products stamped fat, heart-healthy, and doctor-approved. Heart disease kept killing people and remained the #1 cause of death decade after decade. Something was wrong with the theory. The real damage to your heart does not start with fat. It starts with inflammation inside your arteries. Chronic low-grade inflammation inside the walls of your arteries is the enemy, and it builds silently for years before anyone notices. Think of your arteries like a garden hose. When they are healthy, they are smooth, flexible, and elastic. Blood flows through easily with no resistance. When inflammation sets in, the inner lining starts to crack, and the body tries to patch those cracks with plaque. That plaque builds up, hardens, narrows the channel, restricts blood flow, and one day that hose finally gives out completely. So what triggers that inflammation? Not saturated fat from a grass-fed steak or the cholesterol in your morning eggs. The research is clear. The main drivers are processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and hidden sugar. They spike insulin, flood your bloodstream with markers, and damage the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your arteries. After 60, your arteries have already been through a lot. They are less forgiving than they were at 40. The margin for error gets smaller every year. That is why what you eat now matters more than it ever did before. Let's talk about what's actually on your plate, starting with the biggest surprises. Flavored yogurt is marketed as a health food with probiotics, calcium, and a light fat label. But when manufacturers remove fat from yogurt, it tastes terrible, so they compensate by adding sugar. An amount of it. A single container of flavored low-fat yogurt can contain up to 25 grams of added sugar, the same as a candy bar. The same logic applies to oatmeal with flavoring. Plain oats are a food, but the apple cinnamon packet from the supermarket shelf is a different story. Check the label. Many brands contain 12 to 15 grams of sugar per serving. The oats are heavily processed and digest almost as fast as white bread. Whole grain bread and crackers sound like what a doctor would recommend. The problem is what happens to those grains by the time they reach the supermarket shelf in a packaged form. Pick up any whole grain bread or cracker and flip it over. Look past the word wheat in the ingredients and look for what comes right after it. Sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and vegetable oils like soybean, sunflower, or canola oil. These are seed oils processed at very high heat and do something very specific and damaging to your cardiovascular system. They throw off your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in a way. In a body, that ratio should be roughly 4:1, but the average American eating processed foods regularly is closer to 20.1. What do you actually drink in the morning? For millions of people over 60, it is a glass of orange juice or maybe a diet soda later in the afternoon. I need to tell you all three of these are doing measurable damage to your cardiovascular system. Fruit juice, 100% natural, no sugar added, freshly squeezed straight from the orange, is essentially fruit with the fiber completely stripped away. Fiber is the entire point of eating fruit. Fiber slows digestion, controls how fast sugar enters your bloodstream. Without it, the sugar from 3 or 4 oranges hits your blood all at once, a flood. Your insulin spikes hard, your liver gets. That cycle, repeated every morning for years, quietly and steadily builds insulin resistance. Diet soda is another story. I know what you are thinking. No sugar, no calories. What is the harm? The harm is less obvious. Artificial sweeteners like aspartame and saccharin do not raise blood sugar directly. Multiple large studies have linked regular diet soda consumption to significantly elevated stroke risk and cardiovascular disease. Margarine is another category with a history in American medicine. For decades, margarine was sold as the heart alternative to butter. Cardiologists recommended it, government guidelines endorsed it, and entire generations switched over. The problem was trans fats, hydrogenated vegetable oils that turned out to be extraordinarily damaging to cardiovascular health. By the 2000s, the evidence was undeniable, and trans fats were banned or severely restricted in most countries. Then manufacturers had to reformulate their products, replacing hydrogenated oils with intraesterified fats a different kind of chemically modified oil. Frozen meals and meal replacement products are another category that deserves attention. They promise convenience and nutrition together in one box. Flip that box over and look at the actual ingredient list. You will find maltodextrin, a processed starch that raises blood sugar faster than regular table sugar, corn syrup solids, sodium in amounts that would make any cardiologist worry, and a list of preservatives and stabilizers that your great-grandmother would not recognize as food. The low-fat movement of the 1980s and 90s was one of the successful and damaging marketing campaigns in food industry history. Products flew off shelves and people genuinely believed they were protecting their hearts. What actually happened inside those packages? Fat was removed, and to maintain taste and texture, manufacturers replaced it with sugar, refined starch, and corn syrup every time. The research that followed was damning. Replacing fat with refined carbohydrates and added sugar turned out to be a direct predictor of cardiovascular mortality. Not a correlation, a predictor. The very people following this advice, faithfully buying every low-fat product, reading every label looking for the low-fat claim, were in some cases actively increasing their risk. Fat does not make you fat, and fat does not clog your arteries. These are myths that need to be retired. The type of fat and the overall inflammatory load of your diet. Those are what matter. That is where the science actually points. A fat plain yogurt with no added sugar is categorically better for your heart than a low-fat yogurt loaded with artificial sweeteners and corn syrup. Every time without exception, if you see fat on a label, that is your signal to immediately read the rest of that label very carefully. 9 times out of 10, something worse has been put in its place. I have spent most of this video telling you what not to eat, so let me spend a few minutes on what your arteries actually love. Eggs for decades were villainized over cholesterol. The research has largely cleared them. For people, dietary cholesterol has minimal impact on blood cholesterol levels. Eggs provide high-quality protein, choline for brain health, and nutrients that support function. Fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, 2 to 3 servings per week, is one of the powerful food-based interventions I know of for cardiovascular health. The omega-3 fatty acids in these fish actively reduce inflammation, triglycerides improve arterial flexibility, and reduce clotting risk simultaneously. Leafy greens, like spinach, kale, and arugula, are rich in nitrates that your body converts to oxide, which is a natural pressure relief valve for your cardiovascular system. Nitric oxide dilates blood vessels, reduces resistance, and lowers blood pressure naturally. Berries, blueberries, are packed with polyphenols that directly protect the endothelium, the inner lining of your arteries. Multiple studies confirm this effect. Regular berry consumption measurably reduces markers of inflammation within weeks, not months. Olive oil, virgin cold-pressed, is the cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet, which has some of the strongest cardiovascular evidence in the entire history of nutritional science. Use it generously on vegetables, salads, and for cooking at temperatures. It is not the enemy, it never was. The evidence for its benefits is genuinely robust. You are not to blame for any of this. You followed the advice you were given by your doctor, by the government, by the labels on the packages. You bought the fat products, drank the juice, and chose the whole grain option because that is what the guidelines told you to do for decades. Those guidelines were wrong, not slightly off, fundamentally wrong. For 50 years, the nutritional establishment pointed you directly at the enemy. That is not your failure, that is a failure. But here is what genuinely shocks me. Every single time, as a surgeon who has seen thousands of living hearts up close on an operating table, the human cardiovascular system is extraordinarily resilient. After decades of receiving the wrong inputs, it responds to the right ones faster than almost any other organ system in the body. I have patients in their 60s and early 70s who made significant dietary changes and saw measurable improvements in inflammatory markers, blood pressure, and arterial flexibility within weeks, not years. The body wants to heal. It is designed to heal. It just needs you to stop working against it with every meal. Here is your concrete action plan. 3 steps. You can start on all 3 of them today. Step 1. Read every label, not the front of the package with the health claims. The back, the actual ingredient list. Specifically look for added sugar in any form, industrial seed oils, then 5 total ingredients, and anything you genuinely cannot pronounce. If you find 2 or more of those warning signs in a product, put it back on the shelf. Step 2. Take the 30-day challenge. Pick one processed product you eat regularly, just one. Remove it completely from your diet for 30 days straight. Replace it with a whole food equivalent. One swap, that is all. Research consistently shows that even a single dietary substitution produces changes in blood markers within a month. Step 3. Stop fearing food. Butter, eggs, olive oil, fatty fish, fat plain dairy, These are not your enemies. They have never been your enemies. The fear of fat is a 50-year-old marketing story, not a medical fact. Your arteries know the difference between grass-fed butter and a modified vegetable spread. When the calorie counts look similar on paper, the inflammatory response inside your body is completely different. That distinction is what matters most. The operating table is where I fix the damage after it has already happened. What happens in your kitchen every single day, that is where you prevent it from coming back. You have direct control over the health of your heart through your daily food choices than through any medication I can prescribe. That is not an overstatement. I have seen it happen at 65, I have seen it happen at 72. The body does not care how old you are. It responds to what you give it. Let's bring it all home. A quick summary of everything we covered today. 10 categories of foods that are quietly damaging your arteries while wearing a label. Flavored low-fat yogurt with hidden sugar, instant oatmeal packets, whole grain bread and crackers loaded with seed oils, breakfast cereals that spike blood sugar like candy, microwave popcorn and packaged snacks with modified fats, 100% fruit juice with no fiber, diet sodas with artificial sweeteners, margarine and vegetable spreads, low-fat processed products, and frozen convenience meals packed with maltodextrin, sodium, and preservatives. These 10 categories, all marketed as choices, are doing quiet cumulative damage to the arteries you depend on every minute of every day. But this is not a story about fear. This is a story about information. Because the moment you know what is actually happening inside your body, you have power, real practical immediate power over the health of your heart. Start with one change. One. The rest will follow. Small shifts repeated consistently. That is how arteries heal. That is what the data shows and what I see in my patients. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 categories surprises you the most? Drop your answer in the comments. If this information was useful to you today, please share it with someone you care about. Hit that like button if this changed how you will look at food labels going forward, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And before you go, a note about what I have shared today. Everything in this video is educational information based on current cardiovascular research and my clinical experience. Your individual situation is unique, so please talk to your physician before making any significant dietary changes. I am Dr. Kevin Adewale. Take care of your heart. It has been working for you every second of your life.